Good afternoon, I'm Christi Myers and welcome to the February edition of the Menninger Clinic's Facebook Live. We are so happy to be here this month, and this is a month that in February we usually focus on romantic relationships, but now studies say that friendships among women may be better than romance. Do we know if that's true or not? We're going to talk about it today. That meeting with girlfriends on a regular basis can actually make you physically and mentally healthier. So we're here to give you more reasons to set up lunch with the girls. And helping us today are our guests, Dr. Patricia Daza, who is a senior psychologist and director of clinical training for the Menninger Clinic. She's also an associate professor at Baylor College of Medicine. And Vaughan Gilmore, who is a licensed social worker and director of the addiction services at Menninger. She's also leading a team of a dozen chemical dependency counselors. So welcome to you both.
Thank you. Thanks, Christi.
This is a fun topic, one we haven't talked much about. I certainly haven't. And so one of the questions we get is it true that women are more emotional in their friendships than men?
Well, I do think we hear that a lot, and one of the things that we know about is that women are socialized really to talk about emotions and to become more intimate, more so than men. And so unfortunately sometimes they get the label of being more emotional, but I think that's something we're hoping to dispel today.
Now, and isn't there some science behind the fact that friendship actually is healthy? There are some reports to that regard regarding serotonin and oxytocin. Tell us what those are.
Sure. I mean, the research shows that close, healthy relationships in general help with health outcomes, help people heal from negative experiences, and that's also true in close friendships, not just in family relationships or romantic relationships.
Now, we've already been getting some great questions from our Facebook friends, and if you have a question, this is your chance to send it in and get it answered here live. One of the questions with girlfriends, well, is that true? Are guy friends easier? I mean, everybody thinks that.
Yeah, I don't know that that's necessarily true. I think what happens in female friendships is women tend to be sensitive to the thoughts and feelings of each other, and so they may avoid bringing up concerns or avoid conflict because they don't want to hurt the other person's feelings, which actually then sort of hurts the friendship long term.
It's interesting.
Yeah, and I think, not to overgeneralize, but with some men, if they're not able to talk about the, things that might be hurtful, that you know, how they are able to discuss their feelings or emotions might be a little bit trickier. And so with women, we have a tendency to be able to more openly talk about our feelings, depending on the quality of that relationship.
It's kind of fun. There are so many benefits of real girlfriend relationships. Are there other benefits that you can see over the years?
Yeah, I mean, we actually have a lot of research on loneliness, for example, and loneliness can sort of be reduced with sort of close friendships and connections, but we know that when people feel isolated, when they feel lonely through excessive use of social media or because they really are isolated maybe later on in their life, that contributes to poor health outcomes, not just with mental health, but actually physical health as well. So there's a lot of benefits of healthy friendships.
And what we do know that, unfortunately, sometimes when things get too overwhelming, there's different ways to what we call regulate or manage your emotional experience. But what the data really show is through healthy relationships, that's the best way to be able to regulate and manage your emotional experience. Drugs, alcohol, self-injury, other things that people, those are other ways not as obviously healthy. And so our goal is to teach and hopefully gain some skills and ways to build these healthy relationships.
Now, a common problem when you have friends, you can also have rifts that can end a friendship. What are your thoughts on, do you work to end the rifts or do you let those friends go?
I mean, I think it depends on the quality of the friendship, how much you value it, but just the same way with romantic relationships and family relationships, in a friendship sometimes we're going to hurt each other inadvertently, and it's the working through of sort of those unintentional sort of mishaps that actually makes the friendship closer. And so really a healthy relationship and a friendship is one where you can sort of let someone know they've hurt your feelings inadvertently, set a boundary, express concern about something going on, and then work through that together.
Yeah, and I think it's, as Vaughan was talking about, there's often ruptures and repairs. And if it's a relationship we think is worth it, we're going to work together to be able to work through it. As we talk a lot about here at Menninger, what's a good enough relationship? There's no perfect relationship. There's some good things and bad things that happens in relationships. But if this relationship is valuable to you, we're going to be able to try to work through it.
We have another interesting question. Say you have a dear friend and you see them doing something you think is self-destructive. How do you become supportive but not judgmental or enabling them? What would some options be?
Well, I think partly is to really share the feeling, and even again, as much as you can let them know your mind. I was really nervous to bring this up with you because I value our relationship. It may hurt your feelings, but I care enough about you to tell you what I'm really feeling and be able to share that with them, because at times it's easier to avoid, and then this is where all the problems really can start to build for people. So how you approach it.
I mean, one of the sort of simplest ways that I would suggest if you are worried about somebody or concerned about something is to bring it up, like Patty said, from a place of concern, and to use something called I statements, right? To sort of say, I'm worried, I feel, you know, to sort of share it from a personal place as opposed to attacking them.
We have a role play that we'd like to show, because it is hard to say, here's what I'm concerned about, without someone else feeling judged. So you guys are going to role play some friends with a drinking problem.
Okay.
All right.
So Vaughan, you know we've been friends for a long time. I love you like a sister. I've just really been concerned about your drinking lately, and it's something I wanted to bring up to you.
My drinking, but every time we go out, we're drinking together.
Well, I hear that, but I think when I've called you in the mornings, your speech sounded a bit slurred, and I was really worried about your safety and driving to work and for the kids, and I just want you to know that I'm here for you if you want to talk about that.
You know, this is really not something I want to talk about.
I totally respect that. I just want you to know that when you're ready to talk, or if you feel like this is something that you'd like to approach at a different time, I want you to know that I'm here for you.
Okay, thanks, Patty.
That is beautifully done. And it really helped me a lot to hear you can express concern without judgment. And that will help the other party hear without defensiveness. But even so, sometimes it's still going to be hard.
Sure.
But I would think that the person in Vaughn's place would at least have felt like, whoa, I can't believe she said that, but I really still like her. She's still my friend. It's not going to end my friendship.
Yeah, I like that Patty also left it open that, right, if I, you know, maybe I do think about it and I want to sort of circle back, I actually know that there was no judgment and I could talk about it with her at a sort of future point. You know, when it comes to things like alcohol as well, if you're concerned about somebody's alcohol use that you're friends with, I would also suggest that you can do other things, not just express concern, but maybe invite them to coffee or tea or suggest other activities so that you're not having to sort of criticize them, but you might sort of support them in other ways.
Now, are there times where you see friends just outgrow each other or go in different directions? And how do you know when you should just let it go, or should you try to save those friendships?
I think every case is different, but when I think that does happen, people let go relationships, or sometimes we see that as people are getting healthier, the system, either in the family or with friendships, it doesn't feel right. I'm used to you doing, like we're drinking together, and now you're no longer drinking. And so how we talk about that is important, again, for you to decide, is this some relationship, again, that's valuable to me? This is something we need to work on. But unfortunately, that's not the case with every relationship, and sometimes it's a discussion about the relationship ending, or at least for us to work through to get us to a different phase in that relationship.
Well, and sometimes we talk about friendships change because of the different stage of life. You're the high school friend you have less in common with than your college friend if you're attending a different college. What do you think about that? Is that a natural ebb and flow, or should we try to keep in touch with those high school friends and college friends and not let those friendships go?
I don't think that there's a right or wrong when it comes to that. Like Patty mentioned, a lot of times friendships are built on common interests and common values, right? So you're going to look for friendships with people that have similar interests and also value similar things in life. And so you may outgrow some of those. Geographically, they just may not make sense. And some people prefer to stay in touch with people they've known long term. There's not a right or wrong to that.
Mm-hmm. And there might be things that bring you back together. I have a friend recently who's going through some medical procedures and reached out to me because of my connections, and I think we were right there like we were in high school, and this was a very, and is a very close friend to me. But I think different circumstances can bring you closer, and obviously if it was somebody that you were close to, there's a reason for that, so how do I continue to maintain
That's true.
that
That is a good point we should remember. There was a reason you were friends to start with. So before you say, oh, I've changed, remember that. You know, it may still be there. Very good. Well, now we have another good question from our Facebook friends, from Patricia. She says, my girlfriend is very important to me because my family is small, so I don't have much help for my problems. But it's best when I get support, but on the other hand, she has a big family and it's not as important to her to give the support back and forth. What are your thoughts for Patricia? How would she let her friend know that she's very, very important to her?
You know, I would wonder if she has shared that specifically with her friend, to actually sort of say to her friend that how valuable this friendship and important it is for her, because her friend may just not know that. She may not realize how necessary it is for her.
And I think if it is important to her and the friend, then they're going to carve out. So it may not be what we desire. I want to go out to lunch with her every week. Well, it may not be possible with her demands, but if she recognizes this is important to maintain this friendship, I'm going to purposely put it in my calendar and make sure we do this every other month or something like that. That feels comfortable for both parties.
And that's one of the things we were talking about too. After reading these articles, one article said you need to have lunch with your girlfriends twice a week. Like, who can do that? That's a lot. But what do you suggest in terms of a logical thing? And what happens if somebody says, I don't have the time, they're pushing me for the time, and that causes the rift?
Yeah. I think it has to work for all parties. If it's important, this is something, rather than say, we'll get together. If it's truly important, let's get it on our calendars. Does this feel, having a discussion, does this feel like we're meeting too frequently? Is it difficult with your job demands or with childcare demands? So how do we talk about it openly between all of us?
Yeah, I would also think that, you know, it's important to sort of have those healthy friendships and connections, whether that's going to lunch or staying connected in other ways, through phone calls, through FaceTime, ways that you're actually connecting. So I'm not talking about getting on social media and reading through and seeing what all of your friends are doing. Actually, we know that can make people sort of feel more isolated. I'm talking about sort of really connecting, sharing what's going on, hearing what's going on with them. If you don't have time to meet face to face, that's okay, as long as you're feeling connected.
I mean, the whole concept of Facebook friends, are we indeed really friends? Is that a way to stay in touch with your friends?
I think at some level it's a way to stay in touch, but unfortunately with Facebook, the comparisons start, and you know, as Vaughan was talking about, also leading to feelings of anxiety and depression for others, or always trying to compare with the Joneses. It can be very difficult, but I think at some level it is a way to keep in contact with people and family, and I think it has its purpose. Unfortunately, when people rely exclusively on that for relationships, we find they tend not to be as meaningful among us.
I hear more and more people say they're cutting the cords to Facebook and other things. What are your thoughts on what's a healthy level of online friends and social interactions and eyeball-to-eyeball interactions?
I don't know if there's a set number or hours, but I think the fact that somebody's thinking about that is healthy. To say, what feels comfortable for me? Am I really going out with friends, or at least doing things? It doesn't even have to be going out. I mean, we just had lunch together before this.
Yeah.
So how do we, even at work, do you have relationships in different settings, and what's a way that we can connect outside of social media? Because it's too easy to get, nowadays it's pretty impossible to, I mean, it's pretty easy just connect through social media.
Yeah, I mean, I think social media is a great way to keep up with what's going on in other people's lives, to see pictures, to sort of get data, but it's not the same thing as really connecting. And that's what we're talking about. Like, sort of the research you were citing on meeting up for friends with lunch regularly, what's important about that is the connection, the actually sort of meeting and interacting. and feeling close and connected.
And I think with social media, when somebody says something, just like in an email, it's hard to really read the context and understand what's going on. So people jump to conclusions, get their feelings hurt, and you're not likely to reach out and say, oh, did you really mean this or that? And then person to person, you're more likely to kind of work through those ruptures and have those discussions.
So how do you handle the conversations when somebody does get their feelings hurt?
The same way you would with anybody, you know, with a family member, a romantic partner. It's repairing whatever sort of has happened, listening actively, you know, apologizing, setting boundaries, all of this sort of healthy communication that hopefully you have in other relationships.
But it's hard to do with a dear friend because you always have that fear you'll lose them. There's a really nice role play that Patricia and I'd like to do about a friend who gossips.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
So Christi, I ran into Debbie the other day at the nail salon, and she was asking how Ben's treatment was going, and it really surprised me because I had shared that information with you in confidence, and it sounded like you broke that confidence.
Oh, I didn't mean to, but I knew you were close to her, and I thought if you told me, you would have told her.
I could see how you might have thought that. It's just that's something that's really personal for me. In the future, just kind of check with me. I'm going through a lot right now, and I really just want to keep that as private as I can.
Thank you, and I'm sorry. And I could feel, even in our role play, that would be comfortable. The way you set that up, that would be comfortable for me to say, I'm sorry I blew it. That felt very comfortable and did not feel defensive at all. But it would sure be easy for the friend gossiped about to feel angry.
Right.
And if they just stopped talking to you, you'd never know why.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I love about this role play is your intentions were good, right? And a lot of times when we hurt each other as friends, our intentions are good. You thought it would actually be helpful to share this. It wasn't something you were doing to be hurtful or gossipy. And when Patty sort of brought that up with you, she was able to get clarification about your intent as opposed to staying angry and thinking, I can never trust her with anything, right? That having that discussion allows for sort of understanding on both sides.
One of the things we talk a lot about here at Menninger is this concept called mentalizing, being really curious about your own emotional experience and the emotional experience of others. So if you were my good friend, I would say, gosh, I wonder why she wouldn't do this to hurt me. Like, wonder why she would have done this. Okay, one, maybe to get me more support, or maybe she didn't know what to do with the information, but that you're coming up with all these, you won't know exactly why it was, but you're not saying it's because she gossips or it's because she's a bad friend. Once we're in the definite zone, we're out of kind of curiosity and trying to generate different alternatives.
It's a good way to look at it and not jump to, like you said, a definite, this is what they meant, because you don't know what they meant. You really don't. But you still feel hurt, and rightfully so, if you said this is private. And I would bet this is a major reason for women's friendships breaking up. There are some people who say women, to be a good friend, need to be careful about oversharing. And sometimes it's our fault that people gossip about us because we're oversharing too much. Are there kind of some rules of thumb for kind of things we shouldn't share? I mean, we should know that, but people get so comfortable now they'll tell people more than they ever expected to.
I think that as humans, we use sort of gossip and like sharing information as a way to connect, right? It's often well-intentioned. If someone shares something with you and you're not sure, should this be private? I think you can just ask, right? Like, have you told anybody else? How do you feel about other people knowing this? Or would you like me to keep this private?
Or maybe one of the things I thought is, how would I feel a year from now if I heard this coming back to me? Because you can't take it back, especially if you send it out on social media, which we try to tell our kids.
Right.
Once it's out there, and it's really hard. You have to make these choices at your young age, but you do, you know. We have a question from Susie and Lisa. They're saying their girlfriends are getting too busy to text or call. Should they dump these friends? And we've all done that. You've texted somebody twice and 3 times, like, hey, you know, is this the new, are they not paying attention? Or maybe they're super busy, I don't know. But at what point do you say, maybe they're not interested? Because you don't want to look needy, right?
I think it is helpful to first try to understand what might be causing the change. It sounds like this person had been consistent and now something's shifting. There's something going on that they're not ready to talk about. Could they have some medical treatments that are taking up their time? But if it's something that really is valuable, then again, as Vaughan said, you want to let them know what you're thinking. I could be wrong here, but it just seems like lately we've been disconnecting. I really want us to get back to our connections that we had. I feel hurt sometimes when I don't hear from you after a couple. Just checking, is everything okay? So you can kind of check in with them.
So just kind of an easy way of saying, this is how it makes me feel.
Yeah, exactly.
Because the other person may have no idea how you're feeling, right? They may have a lot going on with their kids or with other family members or work, and then next time they reach out to you, you're going to be sort of, your feelings are already hurt, right? And that's how relationships can end.
I see. Well, there are some questions here about what if you don't like your girlfriend's new friend? And she wants to spend a lot of time with this. I love this question because this happens all the time. Your good friend gets a new friend and they include you, but you don't really like them. Or you think they're sending your friend in the wrong direction. Or...
It's a tricky one, but I think it doesn't mean that you always have to hang out with this person. You might even try to schedule some time alone with them. Or if this is somebody you really like as a person, then I wonder what they're, how did they get interested in this person? Do they maybe have some commonalities that I don't have with them? Unless it was something, let's say, not healthy that you see your friend kind of changing, using substances or drugs. That's something I'd share very openly with my friend about the concerns.
And pretty early on.
Pretty early on, yeah.
That makes sense. And then we talked about tips. Are there some basic tips for creating friendships? Say I'm in a rut. I'm not doing anything. I'm tired of work friends. I'm tired of school friends. I need new friends, We talk about hobbies. What are some options for just going out and making new friends?
I mean, I think one of the best options is through like shared interests, right? Whether it's through sort of a workout class or some type of sort of creative expression, like an art class or something, but looking for friends through common interests or through other sort of mutual connections that sort of may know somebody.
And I think this is something that our clients sometimes really deal with when they're giving up substances and want to be sober. They are, in a sense, losing by their choice. They're wanting some different relationships. And it is harder once we're out of grade school, high school, to really make those friends. It's quite challenging, even people who move to a new city. How do you find different friends? So I think what Vaughan says, what do you like to do? Do you like to run? They have different running groups, or bake, there's classes that can happen. So I think there's ways to do that, but it is challenging.
And if a young woman has mental illness, does she share that with her girlfriends, or is that private? Because some people may still be judgmental. As much as we'd like that not to be the case, that could be. So what would you advise her?
This is something we talk about a lot here. It really has to be a choice that feels comfortable for the person. But we say if it really is a relationship that is safe and secure, somebody who's really been there with you, we really encourage people to talk about it, because it's somebody who can be a support to you later, can challenge you later if something comes up. But we do tell people to really be mindful of boundaries. Some people feel like you have to tell at a job interview, or I can put it on Facebook, and it really is not everybody's business. And so we try to talk about what feels comfortable for you, for your boundary. Ideally, this is something they can talk about with close friends or even their family systems. It's a choice everybody has to make for themselves.
Yeah, I think we really ask people to think about it in terms of their inner circle, right? What family and friends are in that inner circle that might be helpful for them to know, because they're going to be supports. If it's a new friend, the same with any new relationship, you may sort of share that information as needed, depending on the relationship.
That's true, and you have to decide your boundaries. So we've talked about if your friend hurts your feeling, you talk about boundaries. We have a role play about boundaries, because I think that may be one of the most difficult things that we have to learn, how you talk about your boundaries without hurting other people's feelings. And Vaughan, you and I'm going to be the boundary crosser.
Okay.
And you're the person who has their boundary crossed.
Okay.
Well, I'm late again.
Yeah.
I know, I'm always
Yeah.
late, but it was no big deal.
You know, it would really be helpful for me, Christi, if you could be on time when we're going to meet up.
Well, I just had a call from work, and I have a lot of deadlines, and you know what my job is like.
So maybe in the future, if you are going to be late, you could just text me, communicate with me about the fact that you're running late.
Do I do it very often?
It has happened a couple of times, and like today we're supposed to see the movie, now we're sort of running late. I'm very busy too, and I really value our friendship, but I, sort of want to keep to our agreements.
Okay. Well, that makes sense too, because you are busy too. So, and this makes sense when you tell people, I'm busy too, And we all have friends we know when we have lunch with them. I did this, I can be 10 minutes late because she's going to be 15. And we don't want to do that. We don't want to do that.
And I do think I hope you felt this, but that it doesn't feel like a confrontation. One thing we talk about is what we call, and this may seem a little cheesy, but carefrontations. Meaning it's coming from a place of caring, but I will set my boundary that this is what feels comfortable for me, and that your time is valuable, because then it builds and I don't say anything, and then I'm not returning your text, and again, that's where our behavior kind of speaks volumes.
And the thing about boundaries is those, again, are personal, right? It may not bother somebody about being late at all. They may just sort of calculate it into their time, and that's not a boundary for them. That doesn't feel sort of like a violation to them because they get it. For other people, it may be sort of a really sensitive topic. So the idea of setting boundaries and sort of having sort of clear communication is really what is important to you, what's valuable to you in this relationship.
Christi, you said something, I forget when we were talking about the role plays about not hurting somebody's feelings. We don't have control over what somebody's feelings might be, right? So what Vaughan had control over is choosing her words carefully and really trying to reflect or validate some of the feelings that you were feeling. But I think that's the piece that we can't have too much control of, and we do our best that we can to at least say what our boundary is, and then that person, then hopefully we can do some repairs if that in fact happens.
And there are other boundaries. What other boundaries in friendship should we maybe talk about?
Well, I think we've talked a little bit already about sort of the sharing of information, like the gossiping, right? That's important to a lot of people. And if you, for example, say something to someone like we said in the role play earlier, and then they violate that boundary again, right? That's sort of communicating something to you that maybe they don't have the same value.
At that point, would you say something or just disappear? If you've decided that this person has different boundaries and that you no longer want to go to the effort to be their friend, what do? What's the better way to handle the end of a friendship?
I mean, I think it's something that deserves at least a conversation, which is going to be challenging. But it's better than just disappearing, because that friend is not really understanding what happened. And hopefully, if they're not going to be able to do it with you, they've learned a lesson that they can carry on into a different relationship. But I think it's helpful to at least tell them what you're feeling.
And it's up to you. Do you want to give them another chance? Do you want to continue the friendship but maybe not share as personal of information? Maybe there's some other value of the friendship that you still really enjoy, doing some things with them, but maybe you won't share as much information.
I guess you can have different levels of friendship. You can take a really good friend and you can make them a casual friend that you see sometimes where you don't share information. It doesn't mean you have to end it, but most people do just disappear. They don't have that really tough conversation saying, you've crossed my boundaries one too many times. That's a very mature adult to be able to say that. It's impressive.
Yes.
We have a great question here about couples who are friends. What about those boundaries? Because sometimes maybe the women share a lot and the men don't, or vice versa. What would you advise couples who are friends?
That's complicated.
It is.
It is, because we may get along, you said, and they may not get along. I think it's something that we at least have to be open, even with our partner, to say, I really feel like you're not getting along somewhere. Is this uncomfortable for you? And we go to these outings, or is there something that we can do that might facilitate that? So rather than having small talk, let's go watch a movie. We don't have to interact so much together, and then after we have a shared topic to talk about regarding the movie. But I think it's something that as a couple, hopefully people are talking about.
Yeah. It might be easier just to say, if the men don't really like each other and the women do, just have women's lunches and just not worry about it.
Yeah. I think sometimes there's ability to make repairs. Sometimes that's more difficult or more challenging, but at least that we're going to make an effort to try to make some change.
We have an interesting question from Susan, or actually it's a comment. Dogs may be better for your health than a girlfriend because they love listen, don't fight or argue, and they don't twist what you say. So I think she had a friend that wasn't such a good friend.
Yeah, it sounds like it.
It's a good point. I'm a dog lover, so I totally
we get that.
But I think that for some clients who really struggle with social relationships, we say this is one level of relationships that's healthy. That you can attach to a dog, that you are loving, that you're responsible. And then the idea is, can I branch off into other relationships? Go to a dog park, and you meet other people that like dogs, and it's easier to socialize that way. Because for some people, they may even struggle, or they may harm animals. You get different levels of, you know, you might see that play out. So that's at one level, I have an ability to connect, to attach, and then how do I build from that? If it's exclusively dogs, obviously that can be an issue.
That's a great idea, though, to take your pet to the dog park or take your pet for a walk where other dog walkers go. And I find I'm always like, oh, there's a yellow lab. That could be Daisy's friend. You know, you kind of look for dogs like your dog. Another good question. Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, I was just going to say, you know, the other thing in terms of Susan's comment, I think that we want to make sure to mention in terms of friendships is that it's about quality, not quantity. Right? That you don't need a lot of girlfriends, but it's really about having those sort of quality, close friends, and hopefully ones that aren't twisting your words.
Oh, I know. That's true. But that's true. You only need, what, 1, 2, maybe 3 good friends? That's true. So you can be picky.
Yes.
Well, we have a good question from Mary Jane. How can you tell your significant other that it's important for you to meet with your girlfriends? Because they may say, hey, you don't need them, you have me.
I think that's a very good question, and not just for her to be able to have her girlfriends, but for guys to be able to have their relationships. And that I don't necessarily have to go every time. And this is something that I value about you, that you have healthy relationships. Even though we're busy, I will stay and help out at home so you can do that. And that hopefully you can do the same, because that's something I really value about your relationship with your girlfriends.
You know, it's kind of like I have a full and complete life, so if I'm a full and complete person, I am more interesting and I'm more an equal in this relationship than if my life is totally wrapped around you. I think that's really healthy to have your separate life, kind of a standalone life, and then you have a life together.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think Mary Jane can tell her husband that she watched a Facebook Live event today where professionals said that girlfriends are really important.
And keeps her healthier physically and mentally. This is true. These studies, one was from Oxford, a bunch of US studies. Very interesting. Here's another one from Lisa, and it's more of a comment that many new romantic relationships are social media tied up, and they do seem to take our friends away until something happens. So the social media friends still can't be there when something happens and you go back. She said some come crawling back, but you go back to your real friends when something critical in your life happens.
Yeah, and I mean, I think we would encourage people to maintain those close friendships even when you are starting a new romantic relationship. I know it's tempting to sort of be all in and spend all of your time with a new significant other, but it's actually those friendships that are going to help you through that.
And we're down to just a few minutes, but there's so many interesting questions we can talk about. And going home again to restart a friendship. Say you lost touch. There was one of the articles, they talked about this little girl in high school lost her very best friend with no word, didn't see her for 30 or 40 years until she wrote an article on friendship. Went back and found her and found out it had nothing to do with her. It had to do with her family was very conservative and religious, and her brother said, Mom and Dad aren't going to like it that you're running around Soho, and they don't like this, and you better stop or I'm going to tell. That's all it was to end her friendship, and she didn't know that for 40 years. How do you restart? She went to a lot of trouble to find her friend. How do you restart a friendship that may have just ended?
I mean, I think it's in that example, reaching back out, showing interest, providing sort of clarification maybe about what happened. Was it that you just drifted apart and now you miss them, or was there sort of something that happened? Because again, like our earlier examples, a lot of it is sort of assumption and miscommunication that can end relationships.
And I think it's helpful to know, why am I thinking about this person so much from high school? Sometimes it feels safe to be there. This is when I was more popular, this is when I knew more people, and it's harder to kind of branch out. I mean, this happens a lot for kids when they go off to college. It's like this big campus, and I'm maybe not so central anymore, and they really struggle to make it. Not everybody, but that can happen. So, not to say it's healthy to kind of reconnect with old friendships, but to understand why. Why is that happening?
And it's nice to find out it was just nothing she did.
Yeah.
You know, what an unexpected answer.
Right.
I'm going to tell. Doesn't that sound like a brother? I'm going to tell, you know. And so, is there anything else that you would advise women in their friendships to keep them going and to keep them healthy?
You know, there was a question earlier about sort of using friendships instead of family, and I think that's an sort of important point I want to make, that sometimes we come from families where there's not a lot of healthy relationships, or they really aren't going to be a source of support moving forward in our lives, and that friendships and friendships with other women can really sort of be a family of creation, to give that kind of support and community that we need to sort of get through life struggles.
And I think these articles, I think, were very important, because as we started out in the beginning, I think women sometimes get a bad rap about relationships, or they're catty, or that when a relationship's healthy and when you really work at that relationship, it can be incredibly meaningful, beneficial, helping us through difficult times, celebrating the great things that happen in our lives. And it's work, just like a marriage. A relationship is work with your girlfriends just as it is with your partner.
There have been some wonderful movies about women friends who bonded and stayed friends for their lives, and that's a wonderful thing. That's a gift to have a friend that can be your friend for 40 years. I said that once. Oh, we've known each other for 40 years, and my friend said, shh, don't let anybody hear. That ages us, but in a way, it keeps you young, because you can. One other person can remember elementary school.
Right,
you know?
exactly.
That's fun. And we talked about going home again, and we talked about just the idea of, it's up to you. If you want to save this friendship, go to your friend, be honest with them. This hurt my feelings, or this concerns me. If you don't care, you're really kind of saying, you know, this wasn't valuable to me. So I guess it's something we ought to actually think about.
Right.
The friends that mean a lot, the friends that leave us uplifted, the friends that leave us kind of down. And those are kind of things that I'm going to think about now, because it's all about uplifting friends. You help others, and hopefully they give you encouragement. Well, we are so glad that you were here today. This was a fun topic. That is all of our time today. But if you have friendship questions, concerns, we want to know that want you to know there's a phone number here that you can call. You can call the Menninger Clinic at 713-275-5400 and ask about friendships. Talk to someone about friendship problems. Again, that's 713-275-5400. And again, I'd like to thank our guest, Dr. Patricia Daza, Senior Psychologist and Director of Clinical Training for the Menninger Clinic, and Vaughan Gilmore, Licensed Social Worker and Director of the Addiction Services at Menninger. Vaughan, thank you for your role play. You too, Patricia. That was really fun. What we did today, I think, taught me a lot about being a better friend. Again, I'm Christi Myers, and we want to thank you for joining us on our Facebook Live.